Now we have some breaking news coming in. The Russian Foreign Ministry has criticized the West and the G7 for their anti-Russia stand. All is not well within the G20. Russia clearly underlines tension between the West and Russia and China as well. And Russia is slated to counter the G7 bloc with BRICS in the G20. Now Russia claims that the West is doing Ukrainization of the international agenda everywhere on international platforms. This is a quote from that statement. Russia is committed to making the Delhi summit a success and ensuring that the Indian G20 presidency is effective. We hope that all other G20 members, especially those representing the West, adopt the same responsible attitude. We will work with a wide range of friendly partner countries within the G20 and rely on the BRICS countries to counter any detrimental processes in this regard. All of this is in the backdrop of the war that is currently going on between Russia and Ukraine and has been going on since February last year. It's been 18 months and counting. Russia at this moment is criticizing the anti-Russia stand of the West and the G7. We're crossing over to CNN News 18's Abhishek Jha, our foreign affairs correspondent, to get us more on this. Abhishek, we've been able to read out a portion of this statement. It's not a surprise, though, that Russia is calling the West and the G7 anti-Russia. Of course, all of this is in the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war. Tell us more.
Of course, yesterday when Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, was explaining Russia's stand on G20 and other important aspects, she clearly underlined the fact that Russia is not very happy with Western countries, especially G7 bloc, creating Ukrainization or putting in the center of everything this Ukraine issue, while from the Russian perspective, not understanding the realities and the actual ground position of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and not putting enough effort in calling for a diplomatic solution or for a solution of the overall conflict. They have also said that G7 bloc has increasingly become creating a Ukrainization of G20 bloc as well, and they are against they're creating a bloc against Russia and China within G20, which Russian Foreign Ministry said that they would like and they would rely upon BRICS membership countries to counter those G7 bloc's allegations or their propaganda information warfare within G20. We know that BRICS countries, the group of nations we just had a summit talks in Johannesburg, all of them are also part of G7 BRICS, this G20 grouping. And ironically, there is now a clear divide because other than the G7 bloc within G20, we have not seen any wider or very well underlined condemnation of Russian action in Ukraine by other members than the G7 bloc within G20. So G20 has always been pressing to other members to condemn Russia, to criticize Russia for its action in Ukraine, which has not happened as per the wishes of G7, and that has created a wide rift. We have already seen that President Putin will not be coming to G20 summit talks in Delhi. His deputy, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be representing Vladimir Putin in Delhi. Now there are also suspicion, but it has yet to be confirmed whether Chinese President Xi Jinping will be arriving in Delhi to take part in the G20 summit talks, especially in the context of recent bilateral controversies that has erupted because of the map issues and Russia and China and India already having a standoff on the issue of Ladakh. Situations in bilateral ties is not going very well. So in that context, how this year's G20 is going to be, what are the agendas, the priorities of the G20? Will they be taking the center stage of the G20, or it will just be a platform of information warfare between West and Russia and China and BRICS countries countering G7? So we'll have to see whether there will be a constructive agenda, coming out with a consensus, or there will be a rift that will continue to go on within the G20 grouping.
Could you explain why exactly there's currently speculation over whether or not Xi Jinping is going to be attending the G20 and why Putin has decided not to attend?
Of course, Putin has not decided to attend because of the internal security situation in Russia. He has expressed his commitment that there are issues in the domestic atmosphere which Vladimir Putin is handling right now. There is a severe situation, a tension going on between Russian forces and Ukrainian forces. We just saw how 2 months ago there was a kind of mutiny within Russian forces. Of course, it was a mercenary force led by Wagner Chief Prigozhin, and he led a force of almost 7 to 8,000 soldiers towards Moscow within 24 hours, and they reached about 100 and 200 kilometers away from the Moscow, and they were trying to become a rebellion, and they were trying to sort of throw the power establishment in the Moscow. So situation in Russia remains very fluid. That is part one. The reason why Putin has given a script to this meeting. The other thing is that there has been an increasing, isolation, at least an effort of isolation by the Western group, G7 group, of Russia at multiple international forums, which Russia has not been liking very much, of course. And they had anticipated that even this time also they would insist on having issues related to Ukraine being discussed or put in the joint communique so that Russian action is shown in the bad light or Russian action is at least condemned. Something that has tried to happen in the Indonesia G20 summit, G20 in Bali also. Probably these were the reasons, or these were the aspects why Russian president has been giving skip to the G20 summit talks in Bali also in 2022 and in Delhi also in 2023.
Absolutely. Abhishek, I'm going to request that you stay with us. We're being joined by security analyst Patikrit Payne on the broadcast right now. Mr. Payne, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. What we're learning about is Russia making a statement criticizing the West and the G7, especially when it comes to being anti-Russia. They're also claiming, and I quote, West is doing Ukrainization of the international agenda everywhere on international platforms, and also saying that they're going to be countering the G7 bloc with BRICS in the G20. What do you have to say on this development?
Well, it's unfortunate because if we have to neutrally look at it, then Ukraine is almost like becoming the Afghanistan of Europe. And this is a war which is de facto, everybody knows about it, that it is a de facto war between Russia and NATO going on. Ukraine is just a pawn in that. So if those who are genuinely interested in preventing the conflict or stopping the conflict from furthering, from having further casualties, this kind of statements that are coming from the G7, this is only going to aggravate the situation even more. Especially before a G20 kind of a summit, when these kind of statements are made, then you are deliberately trying to push a narrative which, today many people are simply not taking anymore. I think a lot has changed in the last 1 year. Today, most people or most countries are not willing to take the Western narrative and Western verdict on things at face value. If you look at what is happening in Africa, even in South Africa, there were tough questions that were posed to certain Western journalists by the politicians of South Africa, that if action has to be taken against Vladimir Putin, if he comes to BRICS summit in Johannesburg, then why should not the same actions be taken against those countries and those presidents and prime ministers who were responsible for invasion of Iraq? So I think things are changing. If you look at the number of military coups that are happening in former colonies in Africa, where they're actually rejecting the presence of the Europeans and the Western interference, I think the West should understand that things have changed. This kind of deliberate statements are not going to help. The expansion of the BRICS is a clear indication that people and countries are tired of the Western interference and a Western hegemony, Western dictum on everything, Western strangulation of currencies, Western sanctions. This is not going to work. So I think the Prime Minister of India through G20 presidency have been deliberately talking about one specific thing, that this is not an era of war. If you have to have a conflict resolution mechanism to prevent disputes from taking the shape of conflicts, then first of all, you need to have a neutral stand on it. The moment you start taking different, the moment you start projecting one side as evil, it is not going to help at all. That is exactly what certain elements in the West have tried to do so far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. When you expand NATO beyond a point, invariably there will be repercussions. I think the West would have reacted the same manner if Russia had wanted to set up military base in Mexico or Canada. We also know what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. So I think it is important for the West to understand that West has contributed a lot in good terms also for the world. But these are the things when it comes to military expansion, when it comes to triggering conflict, when it comes to projecting one side always as evil, whoever is not siding with the West, this must end. And G20 summit is about making sure that those who suffer the maximum because of the unilateral sanctions of the West, these global South countries, their priorities have to be given more importance than anybody else. Prime Minister Modi has been very, very clear-cut and vocal about this.
Absolutely.